All right, for the first time in a decade, we're going to see best on best hockey at the Olympics. Last year, we got just a taste of the quality and excitement of the game with the Four Nations tournament, and we saw the craziest 9 seconds arguably in hockey history. 3 fights in the span of that time. The tensions between two countries made it one of the most anticipated and wild finishes we've ever seen for best on best hockey. Now, the stage is set for the 2026 Olympics, and it's already a mess surrounding it, specifically around the rink. Now, the agreement between the NHL, the NHL Players Association, and the IIHF clearly states that the ice in Milan must be built to NHL standards. However, the main area's construction is not even finished yet, causing the organizers to push test events way back and potentially a few days before the Olympics even start, as Emily Kaplan reported for ESPN. That is no bueno, and it gets even worse. It was reported that the IIHF approved a 196.85 foot by an 85.3 foot of sheet of ice in Milan, which is more than 3 feet shorter than the NHL's standard 200 foot by 85 foot dimensions. So basically, the rink is going to be slightly wider and 3 feet shorter. Now, before you go sending Gary hate mail, the NHL has no control over the construction of the rink in the outskirts of Milan. Now, this stuff does happen. Nashville Predators and the Pittsburgh Penguins played games at Avicii Arena in Stockholm, Sweden just last month for the Global Series in a rink that was also slightly off from NHL dimensions. It was actually the exact same dimensions as we're going to see on the Olympic ice come February. Now, the NHL solution for that was to slightly shrink the space in the neutral zone rather than removing space from the O-zone. Now, if you're curious as to when the NHL learned about all this, it was last week. Yeah, no big deal or anything. Of course, the IIHF are assuring that, quote, the differences are insignificant and it should not impact either the safety or quality of the gameplay. Yeah, pal, I don't know. Tell that to the poor Latvian defenseman going back to retrieve a puck while Tom Wilson comes to end his soul into the boards. And that's what's really interesting about all of this, because this, in some way, shape, or form, will change how the hockey is both coached and played come February. First, starting with roster decisions. With people initially thinking that this was going to be on Olympic ice, which is much bigger, roster construction was probably leaning towards valuing players who are on the faster side of the spectrum and were fleet of foot. Olympic hockey has been played on international ice, which is 196.85 by 98.4 feet. So it is a much wider ice surface, and we saw it in 1998, 2006, and 2014. The ice is far wider, and speed and skill become more prominent with more space to create east-west type of plays. With space being even more condensed, that could change some decisions for specific countries on who to bring. I already mentioned Tom Wilson for Team Canada, who's been in the mix this year, fighting for a spot. Other countries will probably put a bit more of an emphasis on building a team that can check extremely well and make life harder for opposing defensemen. The Athletic had a great article where it asked current players, including Nathan MacKinnon, about what he thought. He said if you have a foot less of space, it can be a big difference. If you get a foot closer in the slot, I think that could be a big difference, but it's the same for everyone. He also said it'll change things, but who the hell cares? I mean, let's be honest, the Nate Dogg could give 2 shits about the size of the ice. They could stick that guy in a phone booth and he'd still end up scoring goals. Jonathan Drouin, though, thinks that it may impact the higher end guys, saying with guys like Hughes, McCarr, McDavid, and McKinnon, those guys need every little inch of room that they can to make those subtle moves. Mike Sullivan, who's the Rangers head coach and the head coach of Team USA, said he would have hoped for a bigger rink and not the other way around. He made a great point saying we're playing on the same sized ice surface that the players were playing on in the 50s. The guys playing today are bigger, stronger, and faster than they've ever been. Even though physically the ice size hasn't changed, the playing surface gets smaller and smaller every single year. Now, judging by how the Four Nations were played, forechecking and neutral zone play were crucial for success in that tournament. When we broke down those games last year, we saw firsthand in the Canada versus US games. Both teams ran a 1-2-2 in the neutral zone, and there were very rarely pucks carried through that area of the ice with possession. USA were able to shut down both McKinnon and McDavid in their first matchup through superb neutral zone play and layers. Really, that's just a modern game, and with best on best, it is amplified. But that all took place on an NHL-sized ice surface. So now more than ever before, breakouts and plays through the neutral zone will be even more difficult to execute with a subtraction of 3 feet in length. This also changes things for zone entries, breakouts, and retrievals. Mike Sullivan, as he said, wanted a bigger ice surface, but we saw on the NHL ice how he wanted Team USA to play in these tightly contested games. With teams like Canada shutting down the neutral zone as well as as anybody, USA didn't bother going east to west against them. Instead, they opted to frequently go north with rimmed pucks to avoid any offensive blue line turnovers, being first to possession on the far side, and then having a strong F2 or F3 to provide support and get off the wall. This kept their game very low risk to avoid Canada getting any chances to attack on the transition, but it also fit their personnel too, with players like the Kachucks, Matthews, JT Miller and company. They could use their big frame to win these battles and then use their skill to get off the wall and make a play. Now, as far as retrievals and breakouts, defensemen will naturally have less time and space to go back, retrieve a puck, and get going on offense. Again, if Four Nations hockey is any indication of what we saw tactically with the talent level of all these players on one ice surface, we will see more and more of these high flip plays out of pressure to avoid trying to slug through the neutral zone entirely and then use the speed to put pressure on the opposing team's D-men in the process. Now, again, going back to personnel, we also saw how important it is having a goalie who can play the puck in these types of games and scenarios. With forechecking pressure likely being amped up with a shorter amount of space, more and more pucks are going to be dumped in to avoid any neutral zone turnover. So having a tendy back there who can stop a puck, be an impromptu third defenseman, and help with the breakout all of a sudden becomes even more significant when deciding which goaltender gets picked to be on the roster or gets the nod for a gold medal game. These are all factors that teams consider for playoff hockey and best on best, but take away 3 feet from everyone on the ice, I'd imagine these factors and play styles will be even more prominent in the upcoming Olympics. Of course, that isn't even the biggest mess. The players are so good, they'll find a way to adjust to all that, but what is really a big issue is that we may not even have a damn rink to play on in the first place. It was reported that the rink would be completed February 2nd. That is just 3 days before games begin, as the women's hockey starts February 5th. You can't even make this up. They may well be playing in a damn swimming pool or with divots on the ice if things don't go according to plan. Now, NHL's Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly said that if the players feel unsafe to play, then they're not going. Simple as that. I'm sure that the last thing owners want is McDavid flying at 40 kilometers an hour and then hitting a rut at full speed into the boards because Mario forgot to flood the ice overnight. And before you get all riled up about me chirping Mario, I'm Italian, so I get to roast these fellas for being unprepared. Now, aside from all those reports, it does seem like the players could care less. There's an entire generation of superstars here that haven't gone to represent their country for a gold medal, and they would be willing to play on just about any ice surface to do it. Of course, the damn thing still needs a roof in order for games to happen, so things will certainly be tight. But hopefully there's some sort of contingency plan in place in case things don't go according to plan. Anyways, what do you think of all this Olympic news? Do you think it'll benefit certain players or teams, hurt them? Personally, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I do know it'll be different in some capacities. In a lot of ways, I think it'll be like playoff hockey on crack, which is awesome to watch. But again, the double IHF rules and any headshot being 5 in a game, teams will also have to be ultra careful not to get too horned up and smoke someone on the forecheck. Tom Wilson. Anyways, drop your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel for more breakdowns. We're almost at 300K. You guys are the best. There's some big announcements coming with that milestone, so stay tuned. And hopefully, my Coogie's over in Italy can quit the 2-hour lunch breaks and get the damn rink built on time so we can finally watch some best on best Olympic hockey.